and welcome to a Sonic Talk special. We've got a special guest because it's a special Sonic Talk. I want to introduce you to the head honcho over at Spectrasonics, the kind of bit of a mogul in the sound design and synthesis world, Mr. Eric Persing. How are you, Eric?
Great to see you, Nick.
Happy
Doing great.
New Year, Happy New Year, and Happy Christmas, and all of those things. I hope you had some time off.
Happy New Year to you.
Did you get some time? Did you get some time off?
We did, yes. It was good. Always working, but take a little time off. It was good.
Because in the States, the Christmas thing isn't quite as you don't draw it out quite as long as we do in the UK, I don't think. So I'm guessing probably Christmas Day and Boxing Day. But it's been a hell of a year for you. I mean, not only have you introduced Omnisphere 2, but all of your instruments, 64-bit, the new delivery method. How are things?
Good. It has. It's been an amazing year. I mean, by far our most successful year yet, and getting Omnisphere 2 out, and the response has been just crazy. It's been awesome, really.
I can imagine that's, I mean, something like this, obviously, big challenge because, you've got all of the success of Omnisphere 1, which was kind of did everything pretty much and had a massive sound library. I mean, how do you approach topping something like that? Where do you kind of start? Do you have a little notebook where you think, oh, I want it to do this, I want it to do that? Or do you kind of sit down and with the team and kind of blue sky it? How does it work?
Well, we do. It's a combination of things. We're working on new sounds and new features and new ideas, new instruments all the time. So it's something that's continuously happening. So it's not so much like we get like, because there's so many things that we can do, but we can't do all at once. So we're working on many things that we would love to do. It's like, well, that's not going to make it into this version. So we'll be dreaming of things, and then it'll find its way into a new version. But yeah, it was a big challenge because there was so much in Omnisphere 1. So we kind of approached this one with from like a bullet point standpoint, where we just looked at like, okay, what would be just the killer set of features that everybody would love, that we want, and then we worked every day off of that bullet point list and then some things moved around, some things had to get taken off, other things came up at the last minute that were really exciting, and so it's kind of that sort of approach, but it's pretty fluid, and it changes a lot. Yeah.
And you do it very differently, don't you? Because I mean, lots of software companies kind of do these tiny little iterations and incremental releases and add a little bit here, but you've always done it this way, where you've just gone big every time rather than kind of do little feature creep stuff. It seems to be much more your style to kind of come out with, here's a bunch of new stuff. So it creates a longer space, but then I guess you've got so much stuff in there for people to find and discover that it's going to take them a little while to suss it all out, right?
Yeah, it is pretty different. Well, I think we swim upstream a little bit compared to what everybody else does. So it's challenging to do it that way. But we do want to each release to be a major event, something huge, and then at the same time we also do additional patches and of course lots of pre-updates and stuff too,
libraries and stuff and that kind of thing.
Yeah. But we don't have. It's interesting. We only have 3 instruments. We've had 3 instruments since 2002.
I've got a little screenshot here. So we've got Omnisphere 2, Stylus, Omnisphere, Stylus, and Trillion. So yeah, there they are in all their glory on the Spectrasonics.net website, right?
Yes. So it's interesting that we've kept refining those 3. And whereas in that same time period, you think that's a long time. I said, what, 15 years?
Yeah.
That's a long time. What our competitors have released, there's been many things released and many things discontinued. But we kind of look at it as almost more like the way a DAW company would, where once we have established I don't feel like we need to make zillions of different synthesizers.
Sure.
We've got a really great one and a great framework, and there's so much we can do to build upon that. We don't necessarily need 10 different synthesizers, as long as, the interface makes sense and it doesn't get too complicated to use. And that's really where the big challenge comes in, is how do you put that much stuff into one instrument and have it make sense and have it be friendly, keep it accessible, and where you don't just get lost. And that's probably the biggest challenge of.
Yeah, I can imagine that must be a lot of head scratching. Speaking of synthesizers, I noticed behind you there you've also got 3 instruments yourself, which are lined up. Well, we won't count the marimba kind of thing because that's not electronic. At least I don't think it is. So is that it is? It's got pickups.
It has pickups in it and has its own preamp, and yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a custom-made marimbula. It's like a gigantic bass marimba.
Oh, nice.
Marimba, but kalimba. It's like a bass kalimba.
So where are you now? Is this kind of your own private synth cave?
This is at Spectrasonics. This is one of the rooms we have here.
Wow. So is that a System 55 to your? I guess that would be to your right.
Yes, indeed. It's a wonderful one. It's been used on lots of famous records, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Michael Jackson, and all kinds of stuff. It's one of the originals, and it's awesome. It's an awesome.
That was going to be my next question. That's an original. So that's saying something right there. And then I'm pretty sure I can see a Jupiter 8.
Yes.
Is that an 8?
Yeah, that's my 8. It's midi and modded and stuff. I've had it for a long time.
And is that a Wasp Deluxe?
It is one of the few. I think there was only about 100 made.
It's a lovely looking instrument, isn't it? I always got really excited by those because the size, because the little thing just was cute, but it was made of that plastic that creaked when you move it, like a kind of old school lunchbox.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's fun that it has a built-in speaker too. Just having a synth that's you can turn on and just start making noise with. It's pretty great. So we have all kinds of hardware instruments around us, all kinds of real instruments around us all the time, wherever we are working here, because we always want to be reminded, of what our goal is, and what, especially on instruments like these, where sonically they're really, very, very special, and computers still, there's a significant sound difference between, the Moog behind me and all software.
Sure.
We still a ways to go before we really get that. And it's easy to be, because the software stuff sounds so great, it's easy to be lulled into, becoming complacent, or it's good enough. We don't ever want to have that good enough kind of feeling. It's always got to be what's the ultimate.
That's a really interesting approach. I mean, I must admit, whenever I'm reviewing, not just software, I don't do a lot of software, but synthesizers, I've got a few instruments here that I kind of occasionally switch back on and just kind of remind myself what that extra third of an octave down below sounds like, or what that range sounds like. It really is very surprising sometimes, the difference between the two, the real thing, I suppose, if that's not a kind of weird way of looking at it, because everything's kind of real if it's made of electronics and software. I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting, that concept of what's real, what's digital, and because really when we're comparing it, like we can't, when we're talking about these kind of differences in comparison. Those aren't differences that we can do in the digital domain, and by that I mean I can't listen to these instruments digitally. I can't put them into an interface or into a computer. We literally patch these into speakers, or just through like straight wire mixers and that kind of stuff. So it's like really, really pure. That's the part that hasn't really been. We're not quite at that point yet digitally. It gets closer and closer every year, though.
It really does. I mean, and the interesting thing is because I mean, I'll rewind it a little bit. I mean, when you started out, a lot of your stuff was sample based. That's where you kind of saw your first opportunity to kind of go solo, I suppose, or at least break out from working for other people. And yet now you've got your own, the Steam engine and the Sage engine, which give you that kind of additional control that you have. How tightly are you into the nuts and bolts of what's going on under the hood of those things, or do you just kind of prefer to have people make it so, and you just kind of yes no? I mean, I imagine you're a fairly hands-on kind of guy, right?
Yes, but I'm not a coder, so I don't code myself.
Sure.
But basically, what we got into the business doing sounds, and of course that's where my expertise is, and that's where I came from. But really, what I loved doing with Roland was having that opportunity to actually get to, even though I'm not a hardware designer, I got to influence a lot of the designs at Roland in their hardware synths and sequencers and all of that fun stuff that is now considered vintage and classic.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny that, isn't it? The way that kind of it's in the same way that I always remember when I was a kid. I mean, just the analog and and digital and kind of what's supposed to be. But when I was a kid or just starting to get into studios, SSL was seen as the sort of the poor relative of the big analog consoles, purely because of the recall and stuff. And now, it's the top of the tree. It's really interesting the way that things cycle around and the perceived sound. It's how I suppose it's just how relevant the sound of something is at the now, or for how long it remains relevant in many ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I love that experience of being able to actually get to design instruments. But of course, with Roland, I didn't. I couldn't have my own way.
No, sure.
It was a large team, and so I got to play on that team, and I got to do some pretty significant things. But really, the ultimate dream for me was to be able to make my own synthesizers, make my own instruments. And when I realized that was possible with software synthesis and software sampling, that was like just a revelation that I wasn't going to need $100 million factory like Roland has, to make instruments, but we can dream them and they can become a reality. So I'm very involved in terms of the design and the testing and the feature specs and kind of everything but the hardcore coding. I'm very involved in directing the rest of that. And I enjoy it. It's fun, and it's really interesting working with our software team, and that was a big change too in the company was when we actually brought on our own team of software developers instead of licensing the technology.
And I can imagine right back at the beginning, it's such uncharted territory. I mean, maybe we'll come back to that in a bit. But I mean, what was interesting to me is kind of how this route started for you, because you started off what's your sort of core instrument? What was the thing that you first learned and that started you off on your musical journey?
Well, I started on trumpet, right. And my dad is I grew up with him being a choral director, and he plays all the instruments, and so I learned a lot. I was around music all the time, but then just that something about sound. I was more interested in sound, I think, than I was even in pure music. Music is what drives everything, and that's the goal. I mean, music is what it's all about. But being fascinated with sound, I was thinking about this morning. There was this amazing sound as I was coming out on the way over here in the trees. There was this huge flock of green wild parrots that flies around our area sometimes, and the sound it was making was it was awesome, and it just sounded like all these like thousands of like squeaking oscillators, and like it was completely natural. And I didn't have my full recording rig, but I got a little bit on my iPhone.
Do you carry stuff around with you to kind of capture moments like audio scratch pad for sound ideas?
After this morning and not getting a hi-fi version of that, I think I'm going to start doing that, because there's been a number of moments like that. But anyway, all that to say is that's kind of that sort of stuff really gets me going. And so as I was learning piano, I was as interested as what was going on inside the piano, and playing inside the piano, and checking out what would happen if you put different objects inside the piano when I was a little kid,
So a bit prepared piano kind of action. Right.
Yeah, like that was as interesting to me as learning the notes and learning everything else. So for me, it's all connected. It's the sound and music and creating an instrument that makes sound. But it's fun. It's definitely fun.
So you started off more as a player. I mean, that's when you kind of got introduced to the studio environment, and I'm guessing that was probably where you first began to see electronic instruments and instruments that were perhaps not so readily available. Is that correct?
Well, I was interested in synths really early, and it's interesting. I saw a picture of the Tonto synthesizer.
Sure.
And when I was about 11 years old, and it turns out that the building that I'm in, our building is actually where Tonto was. Like this building belonged to Bob Margouleff of Tonto. Just purely coincidence, kind of kismet. And so I was just fascinated with this. All of this,
Yeah.
this incredible world of synthesis. And so every moment I had, I would go to the music store and I would try synths, and it drove me crazy that I couldn't figure out how to make them work or shut off the sound,
Yeah.
Because back in the old days, you could have an amplifier that would continually go. And so, so that was I was always fascinated by it, even though it was inaccessible to me. And then as I got more into playing and I went through college and recording and stuff, I ended up at a music store right around the time that MIDI had just happened, and we had no customers. We had literally every keyboard in the world. Like, we had everything. It was the greatest store ever, but there was no customers because you could see it from the freeway, but you couldn't actually, there was another store that had the same address.
Right.
You couldn't actually get there. So, so all we did all day was figure out these instruments and figure out how to connect these things. And back then the knowledge level in terms of MIDI was pretty arcane and brand new and mysterious. So even what a sequencer was for, or did, or how you connected a MIDI sequencer in a drum machine, things that we take for granted now. So we were actually the first, since we had so much time, we were like the first people in the United States that actually figured out how to connect a whole room full of MIDI gear and have it all trigger off of, it was an MSQ 700. And so normally the dealer or the manufacturers send their reps to train the stores. And so what would happen is, because we had so much time, when the reps would come to our store, we would train them.
Right.
Because we knew the gear really well because we had no customers. We just we just make music all day. And then when we finally get a customer, we'd say, man, come on back. And we'd have this incredible demo set up, and then we hit the play button and had this huge PA system and blew people away. And we'd make, one sale.
But they buy everything, right?
Well, no, people couldn't afford all of it. But
no.
The store went away pretty fast. But that's how I got recruited for Roland, because Roland started sending all of their people in the country. They came to be trained by us at the store. Right. And so the president, Tom Beckman, the president of Roland, he heard about what was going on. He said, well, what's going on at this store down in Orange County? And so he came down, and I gave him this big demo, and he said, well, why don't you come demo at the NAMM show? And so that's how I got to demo at the show for Roland.
So what was that first show like? Because, I mean, now it's very... I'm thinking it's bigger now, right? And it's more chaotic, or maybe I'm wrong there, but I'm guessing when it started out, I guess what would that have been, 84, 85, sometime around then?
That would have been 82, actually. Right. 82 or 83, I think. I can't remember exactly, but well, at that time, the summer show was the big one.
Right.
And so it was in Chicago. And so that was, it was Chicago and Anaheim was the little one. Right. And Chicago was the big one. And so, but it was a mind-blowing experience, and there were so many things, revolutionary, trend-setting things that were introduced by Roland at that show. It was the first. It was the introduction of the SBX 80, was like the first, time code, synchronization thing. The MSQ 700 was still brand new, and the whole concept of MIDI modules was introduced. So all that the MKS 80, the MKS 80, MKS 10, I think like the very first modules, and the master keyboard, the octapad, like drum controllers. It was all that same.
I mean, that was quite. I mean, now you say we take that for granted, but that's actually quite a visionary thing that happened there. I mean, was that something that you walked into, or you were involved in the way that kind of went together? Because in many ways, the notion of having the master keyboard and the modules really made a lot of sense, and it started to kind of work for people because we didn't have so much room, and people were touring it. I guess there's all sorts of reasons why they would want to go that route, right?
Yes, and so I was coming into really this incredible time at Roland, where MIDI was just starting, and so being able to be part of that, and so I got hired right after the show and started working for Roland US, and then very quickly, that the biggest problem they had was the sounds that came in the keyboards were so bad that it was really hurting sales. And so, compared to if you buy a Prophet 5 or an Oberheim, I think the first preset on a Jupiter 8 was a cow. It was like
smart.
Like,
just what everybody needs.
Yeah, like a cat. And then it was like basically sounds that the engineers thought were funny.
Wow.
And that's why you see all those names on the old Roland synthesizer, Funny Cat. Yeah. And all those are all the engineers just love that stuff. And they're not musicians. They're just basically, so they really needed somebody that could sort of represent, explain, work with the Japanese on getting a more Western approach to the sounds, and sounds that would appeal to musicians in Western countries. And so you
fell in right at that right time then. I mean, were you emulate, and what were you doing? Were you sort of emulating sounds that you wanted to hear or were hearing in productions that you were hearing over here, or were you kind of just going, I know what, were you kind of inventing sounds from scratch?
Both. It was trying to emulate acoustic instruments, with analog synthesizers, and which is hilarious to think about it now. It's complete waste of time. And then, yes, of course, like being inspired by sounds that were happening already, and then being inspired by the technology and coming up with new sounds. And so that became my role is kind of being that interface between the Japanese and Western countries, and representing Western taste, and getting to have a say in what the direction of these instruments were, and then doing all of the sounds for the instruments. Wow. And so that was such a awesome gig, and I did it for a long time, and it was so much fun. And
I'm guessing some of those instruments were they were utilizing new concepts in terms of DCO, what have you. But at that stage, it was still pretty much subtractive analog synthesis. So they were kind of fairly bad. And this is something that's really odd for me. I mean, I recently reviewed the JP08, which is of the new boutique, and Dave Spears lent me his Jupiter 8, and I thought, wow, I've never played one of these. And one thing that really struck me about it was quite how basic it is, the Jupiter 8. It's actually not a terribly complex synthesizer.
No.
And there are no effects. And it's really odd in many ways. And I'm guessing you were working in a lot of ways with lots of dry stuff. So, I mean... So that must have been even more challenging, because effects didn't really... you might have a delay pedal if you were lucky back then, wouldn't you? Or some kind of... or a tape echo or something. Yeah,
so you have sounds with a lot of release and stuff to try to simulate echo and reverb and stuff like that. But it was a dry world back then.
A dry world. But then, of course, from then, I mean, guessing the the ROM sound set started to come in, and the sample plus synthesis engines were really kind of this. I mean, it was really pretty exciting. The M1 and the D50 and all of those things, which really opened things up. I mean, at the same time, also made things much more complicated to operate and to program. So I'm guessing your services were even more necessary because not many people enjoyed programming through an LCD screen in those days.
Yeah, and by that time, because Roland, was really in serious competition with really trying to compete with Yamaha, because of course they had the DX7, and that was just so huge. So, and we were trying to explain to people why analog synthesizers were good, and why analog drum machines were good when there's a Lin. Or I remember trying to. A lot of people forget that the 909 was a massive failure, and of course it went on to become probably the biggest. That and the 808, the biggest drum machines ever.
Well, both of them really, and the 303. I mean, these are the things that. But again, I think that's probably down to perhaps the Japanese approach to marketing, because of the way it was considered. This is what we think it would be a good idea, but it was kind of out of step with things at the time, perhaps.
Yeah, it was out, and it was also all of those ideas were based on emulative ideas, right. and they were a sort of a goofy attempt at emulating. The 303 is supposed to sound like a bass guitar.
Yeah,
it was an utter failure at that, but it's amazing in its own right. And so I remember. The Japanese were trying to get us to sell the 909 as a jazz drum machine. It was really because
well, I guess had swing, didn't
really,
it?
Like, the cymbals were nice. So anyway, we were completely in an analog world, but we had DCOs and things like that, and so I was with Roland during that whole time, and working on making the sounds for the Junos and the Jupiters and all the JXs and all that stuff.
I've got to ask you, when was the first time that you heard one of your sounds like right up front in a big record?
Let's see. The first time was probably David Foster's stuff, because he was using those JX8P voices and soundtrack on the JX8P. That was the first soundtrack. That was also a pretty popular sound.
That was you too. Was it? Is that a fifth or a fourth? I can never remember. But it made it through.
On the D50. On the D50, it's fifth. On the JX8P, it's more of just like a really deep drone or deep add. It's a different sound, but it has the same. I like that name, so I kept using it. But probably the weirdest thing was what I did for the Alpha Junos, because it was years and years later. We were working, I think, on the JX, the JV1080s and all the JV stuff, and we were getting a lot of pressure from the European countries to have more European sounds, and they kept talking about this Hoover sound,
right?
And I was like, what's a Hoover sound? Like, what is that?
Yeah,
and because that's not a term you heard in the States.
A vacuum cleaner.
Well, yeah. So I'm like, so they're like, and I'm getting faxes and telexes and stuff from Japan. We got to get more Hoovers. I'm like, I got to find out what this Hoover thing is. So anyways, and it was kind of the early days of bulletin boards and early internet stuff. And I remember researching and trying, okay, like, what is this Hoover? And I hear it, and so I hear this sound. I'm like, okay, so that's the sound. And so I'm looking up kind of just where it came from, and I find this early website that's dedicated to the Hoover, and it says that the sound is made by the Alpha Juno. Right. And I'm like, and it's this preset called What The? Right. And I'm like, that's my sound. And so here I was, and I was getting all this flack for not that our stuff wasn't European sounding enough. And it was the greatest thing to be able to say, Actually, I made that Hoover sound. That's
Brilliant.
our sound. It's actually something we did a long time ago, but I did it as a joke. It was like a joke sound I put at the very end for the Japanese engineers who like all these humorous sounds. And so I didn't get the whole Hoover reference because that's what you say in the UK.
Yeah.
In the UK, you say that's a vacuum cleaner. And which is odd because I actually used to fix vacuum cleaners.
Now we're starting to get really spooky.
It's very weird, yeah.
So at this same time, you were, at the same time as designing sounds for presets and what have you, you were working on sessions and working on records as well. Is that right? At the same kind of period. Yeah.
So that's essentially so after that whole period with the JXs and Junos and Jupiters and all that stuff I was doing with Roland, and kind of starting to work on the samplers, the S50s, and of course all the drum machines and stuff. That's when the big push for this is the D50 is going to be the big deal. This is going to be our answer to Yamaha. And so they brought me over and a couple of other guys and they played it for us. And after this long introduction, telling us about the technology and how it was going to change the world, and then they played it for us. And it was the worst sounding thing I ever heard. It sounded like worse than like a Yamaha Porta sound. Right. It was so cheesy sounding. And so we were just sweating. We were like, this is not going to fly. But there was this PCM part of it. And that, okay, well, maybe we can beef up the PCM part. And we can turn it into something interesting if we do some creative stuff with that. And so I started working really hard on, creating those wavetables and all those samples and all those little attacks and that kind of stuff.
That must have been really challenging, because the amount of ROM and the that you were dealing with. We were talking about tiny little fragments, right?
Yeah. It's only I think the entire it's 512K or something is all that stuff fits in, or
wow,
something less than a megabyte. And so anyway, so I got to be part of that whole journey from the very, very beginning. And basically, as we were, as the sample side was starting to come together, the software side also came together, and it was really fascinating to see that something that sounded so horrible, like suddenly with a software update, of the firmware, the firmware. It could radically change. And suddenly, the chorus sounded great, and before it sounded horrible. And so that was my first experience of like, wow, like with just the right coding and the right back and forth between the coders and the musicians, you can really take something from being absolutely awful to being something really special. And anyway, I got to be the person that introduced the D50, and I did a lot of the sounds for it, a lot of the classic ones, and I was involved in it all the way from the beginning. And so my first time showing the D50 in the United States, I think the front row was literally, it was Quincy Jones, David Foster. It was just everybody. Like
big shots.
Yeah, it was like it was the who's who of LA recording and synthesizers, and it was amazing. And so all I had to do was play that digital native dance sound, and people were. That's all it took, kind of back then, was a couple of deep notes, and you were sold. But anyway, that I had the only D50 in the United States for about a year.
Wow.
So all those sounds were like my personal sounds, and I was very attached to them. And then as a result, I got called to do. I got called in to do a lot of big sessions, and that's kind of how my. So were you playing in those sessions, or was it primarily a kind of? So you were the kind of the synth, the D50 player, effectively, right? Not necessarily D50. It was that, but that was the thing that sort of got me in the door, and then I'd bring my whole rig with all my synths, and PPGs and all that, all the stuff that was being used at the time. And so I got to that's how I sort of got my foot in the door. And then I would program sounds and also play and also arrange, and that's how I got into arranging and producing. And
so I'm guessing those sort of chops. I'm just thinking back. Programming sounds for the D50, for instance. Did you have other tools that allowed you to program them sort of more deeply or more with a bigger overview than just through the front screen, or were you doing it all via the interface that it had as well?
Well, we had the PG-1000,
Right.
the programmer for it. So that's a lot better than using that little screen. But no, there wasn't a lot of other tools, and it would change all the time. There's some sounds like you can see on the internet. There's a few sounds that I played, I think, at the Music Mesa introduction of the D50. If those videos, I think I've seen those videos on the internet. There are a couple of sounds in there that you can't actually make with a real D50.
Wow.
That you can only make with that prototype because they changed. I think they had to change the LFO structure, so. I mean, me and only a couple of other people are probably the only people that notice the difference. But
I guess what I was getting at, really, because those kind of big sessions, it's not so much the same now because obviously lots of people have their own facilities. But when you're brought into a session like that with all your stuff, there is a time pressure going on because either the artist might be coming in at 5 and wants to hear what you've done, or it's $2,000 a day just for the studio space or whatever.
Sure.
Were you part of what you were doing because you were so fluent in it was the speed with which you could kind of work? Was that something that kind of helped you move through those kind of sessions and reach all of those people?
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to make sounds quickly, and something that really helps with that is because I came up and I was playing live without any programmable synthesizers. Right. So very few people have that. Well, there's actually more of it going on now with the Eurorack stuff and everything, but there's something about you really need to know synthesis and you really need to know your instruments and how to create sounds quickly if you have to do it in the middle of a song. And you're, with one hand, you're programming the next part sound while you're playing the other part. It's pretty challenging. When you have an instrument that's programmable and you have presets, it's a lot easier. So I think that helps me a lot in terms of honing my ability to create sounds quickly. And I love people. I love being around people, and it's fascinating to me when someone has something in their head. It's a real challenge to try to figure out, okay, how can I create what's in their head, and also show them something that maybe they haven't heard or thought of. And so I love that aspect. So doing sessions and doing sound design of sessions and working as a synthesist, that was a natural progression for me.
Do you still get to do that kind of thing, or is that now you're sitting in your swivelly chair at Spectrasonics, looking down from the 99th floor, no doubt? Do you still get to do that kind of fun stuff in the studio for other people and collaborate in those kind of ways, or is that something you don't have so much time for now?
I don't have a lot of time for that, for being on call as a session player. But I still do music for sure. And when people, it's more like, artists that I have a strong connection to, or my own stuff, but yeah, it's critical to keep going musically and keep creating and making sure that you're connected to what's happening musically. But yeah, I don't have time to do.
Not so much time for that. I'm guessing because legendarily also you worked on some of the Jackson sessions for Quincy Jones, and I've subsequently watched a couple of life story documentaries about Quincy Jones, who is the most mind-blowing individual I think I've musically.
Absolutely.
Where his journey from like the ghetto to Boule and all, it just really blows my mind. So, that must have been really exciting times.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And when you're around somebody like that thinks so big, and they give you a challenge. Quincy's very into that. Like he would come in and say, all right, I want the greatest bass sound in the world. I'll be back in an hour. And
how did you do?
After all the amazing bass sounds that have been done on all the records he's produced, and you're like, okay, what kind of bass sound or what? So it's a great challenge, and yeah, he's an inspiring guy. Absolutely, those sessions were mind blowing. Being around all of that, it was.
And again, were you involved in some of the creation of some of those signature sounds on those records as well? I mean, do you think back and just go, yeah.
That was.
I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to drop some tracks now and tell me what was yours.
Well, I did a lot of stuff on the Bad record.
Right.
So a lot of the, a lot of the stuff on Man in the Mirror and
right.
Dirty Diana and Bad, the song Bad. But there's so much that those tracks are so dense. Like there's so many people that worked on them. It's difficult to. There were multiple teams of synth groups that were working on things. So it certainly wasn't only me. But yeah, I got to, there are certainly moments where it's like, yeah, that's my
one.
part. Yeah, that's a neat thing. I had, speaking of the D50 and Michael Jackson, I had it was the craziest experience meeting him, because it was this, it was amazing. It's like, wow, I'm getting to work on this. And it was after Thriller, so he's the biggest star in the world.
Sure.
And I know I'm basically, I'm going to get a chance to meet him, but it's going to be like meeting Elvis or something, right? It's like at that sort of level,
Yeah.
So I'm completely like, I don't know what I'm going to say or, so my friend, Larry Williams, who got me the gig, he said, well, come on, I'll introduce you to Michael. And so Larry says, Michael, this is Eric Persing. He's one of the guys, who designed the D50. And so Michael grabs my hands and he just kind of freezes. And he's just like, how did you do that? and he's like he's like blown away, and I'm like, I'm meeting Michael Jackson.
Wow.
It was the strangest experience of the world. It was just among many, many bizarre things that happened in those sessions. But that was but sweetest guy, amazing.
Great
amazing.
memory, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
So I mean, moving on from that, I mean, that sounds like a hell of a lot of fun, and a whole period of your life you can look back with fondness, no doubt. And then, you decided to kind of go, well, I think what the world needs is some instruments and some sample sets made by me. I mean, that must have been quite a leap of faith, because I mean, the technology wasn't really hugely developed. I mean, I guess you must have had to just really take a leap of faith, effectively, to start the whole Spectrasonics thing up, right?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting progression, because most of what I was doing, most of my income came from doing sessions, and then I was also working with Roland and creating sounds and instruments and stuff with them. So I had both things going. I had my steady thing with Roland, and then I had my session thing, but most of my income was really from sessions. But what I was finding was, especially around the time that we did the JD800, the JD990, and the sample libraries for Roland, we were doing a lot more of those. I was finding more and more that the people that I was working with were more interested in buying an instrument from Roland than actually because they could get like a JV1080 and have 500 of my sounds for less than the price of hiring me and all of my gear
to make 500 sounds. Yeah.
Well, to make one sound.
Yeah, sure.
For a day or for a couple of sounds that are custom. So I saw the trend. The trend was kind of going away from hiring people to create unique sounds, which I love doing. But so I was basically putting myself out of work.
Right.
What I was doing for Roland was actually putting me out of business in terms of the sound design work that I did in sessions, which was a lot of what I did, and kind of my calling card. So and we were creating. I was creating all the libraries for Roland, all these sample libraries, and we were going all over the world, and working for years creating all these huge libraries, and Roland really didn't know how to sell them or market them. They would sell them with the Boss socks at the back of the catalog, something we spent like millions of dollars making, and then they would wonder why it didn't sell. And so we were getting a lot of pressure at Roland. So I was frustrated because we were doing such high level work, but they didn't understand really what we were doing or really understand the value of it. Kind of getting stuck against some of the bean counters, and
well, also a little box of floppy disks is pretty uninspiring on a shelf compared to something large and hardware, I suppose, isn't it? So you
right. So they didn't understand the idea that the sounds themselves could be a product. The sounds are just something that you stick in the thing.
Right.
And and of course my passion being sound, that was something I was always rubbing up against, and they always just wanted to, they were getting to this thing where they wanted to just release the same version of the instrument kind of every year, but with different sounds inside.
Right.
And so one of the big successes I had with Roland was convincing him to do the expansion boards. And that way, you could buy one keyboard and put boards in it, and get sounds, and that worked out really well. But anyway, so I was really frustrated because I had another series of sounds that I wanted to do. I was working with Marcus Miller and John Patitucci and Abe Laboriel, and they were good friends of mine too. And so I wanted to do. Nobody had done a bass sample library, especially with at that caliber. And so I wanted to do this Legends series for Roland, and but I realized that they didn't understand really. That wasn't really their business. They didn't really understand it, and so I was moaning about this with my wife, and she said, and I said, I got this idea, but I can't use it, and I've got these contacts, but it's just a drag. And she said, well, why don't we do it? You probably know 200 musicians in LA that would buy something like that, and we can just we can sell a couple hundred copies, and we'll have enough to buy a new Honda. That was basically the business plan.
Right.
And so that was the beginning of Spectrasonics, and so we started with 5 phone lines in our kitchen, and at the time we also. This gentleman, Bob Daspit, who I was mentoring at Roland, we had been loaning him out to Hans Zimmer, basically in exchange for these great sounds that Hans was giving Roland to use. And so Bob was creating a guitar library for Hans, and so he was trying to figure out how to sell it. And then these guys came to me from Singapore that had this amazing Asian collection. They had all the amazing gamelan orchestras and Chinese operas and stuff coming through Singapore. And so all these things came together at the same time, and we had these 3 incredible products, Hans Zimmer guitars.
Were these? I'm trying to remember back now. Were these actual programs for samplers, or mostly just sort of actual? So you programmed them into. Was it the Roland series or the Akai series that you did them for mainly?
We did it for all the different samplers. So we did it for Ensoniq and EMU, Roland, Akai, Kurzweil, Sample Cell, Audio. So we would make the same product over and over again. But so that was that was the beginning of Spectrasonics. We had those three products.
That's pretty labor intensive, I'd imagine. Were you programming? So were you I mean, aside from just the key groups, were you getting into the synthesis features of the different samplers? Because I mean, obviously the Kurzweil and the Rolands had more synthesis, had groovy filters, and the Akai's were a bit less kind of synthetic, or had less synthesis capabilities. So you were programming. Were there different libraries for different, with the same samples for different samplers? If you see what I'm saying, different sounds.
Yes. But it was frustrating because we couldn't really advertise the features that we could take advantage of in the Kurzweil or Sample Cell or Roland, for example, because most people had Akai samplers.
Right.
And so we had to have basically the Akai was the limit of what you could do synthesis wise or innovation wise, even though the Kurzweil might
tough break.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was actually, it's a good point you brought up, because that was one of the things that was frustrating once we started Spectrasonics, was we were limited in that way. We had to support all of these different platforms, and we had to only use the lowest common denominator of what the synthesis capabilities were, when my whole interest is in pushing the envelope of synthesis and creating new sounds and bringing things together and you know, obviously creating stuff you've never heard, or pushing the envelope. So that's why when I saw what was happening, we did CD-ROMs for a long time, from '94 till 2002. Wow, and I think it was in around 2000. We were the first company to ever show. This is strange to say, but I was the first person to show making music on a laptop at the NAMM show. And so I actually did my whole demo only on a laptop, which sounds like nothing now, because that's what everybody... But at the time, it was pretty revolutionary.
What was it? Was it like a 540, an Apple... 540 LC or something,
something like that. Yeah, it was like really, really... it was the first one that could basically run a software sampler. And so I showed like our libraries using a laptop, and so I got really excited, and we were also working with all the people that were creating these kind of platforms, like the Unity DS1 and the Gigasample people, and basically all these different companies. So I ended up working on so many different samplers for different people, and consulting for them and giving them advice on, you know, what things work and what things don't.
And in a sort of bizarre way, even though it was going to software, you ended up with then another bunch of different standards and different capabilities across those two.
Yeah, and that's why, and we could see that coming. We could see that there's a huge wave of additional platforms coming. And so we wanted to leapfrog that and forget that whole approach. So we never did our libraries in software sampler platforms. We only did hardware.
Right.
And we went straight to doing large-scale virtual instruments, because I could not only design the sounds, but I could design really design the interface, the features of the synthesis. And so we worked with the French company that does UVI. And so we basically helped them develop the UVI engine, and then we licensed that from them, and that went really, really successfully. It was just because it was really the first time anybody had released a product that was cross-platform and multi-platform. So, you know, the idea of VST and cross-platform.
So was that pre-Contact as well then, or was it
way before Contact? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so NI wasn't even doing this yet. So and it's funny, we came to NI first, and they really had no idea what we wanted to do, and so they never called us back, which is kind of funny. So but the French guys were really excited. They were our distributors in Paris, and so we worked really closely with them and basically got that platform going, and. But they were great, because they would allow me to add features, and you know, I need another envelope, I need the different kind of filter, and they, you know, designing the interface however I wanted it. And so that was Atmosphere, Trilogy, and the original stylus. So that was,
Right.
we introduced those in 2002, and then that's when things really changed for the company.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, stylus. I don't know about the rest of the world, but certainly in Europe, it was and still is for many the kind of go-to beat maker, because it is so flexible and allows you to combine grooves and synthesis and all kinds of, slicing and what have you. And it's a very interesting paradigm. And I'm guessing that was that the thing that really took off first for you?
Well, I think the original stylus was big, and then but Atmosphere and Trilogy were equally so. And then it was in 2004. That's when we decided to go our own way and develop our own engines, because working with licensed technology is pretty limiting. We don't own the technology, so the French guys had they wanted to create the Mach 5 and kind of do this stuff with
and it can limit both parties because they're going in one direction, you're going in another. Yeah,
that's basically what happened. And it was so it made sense for us really to develop our own instruments, and that's what we did. The first one was Stylus RMX, and then that's really and then that was a whole another wave that was really huge and still going strong.
I've still got Stylus RMX myself. So, I mean, with all of this kind of exploration in cutting edge technology and cutting edge synthesis and those techniques, I mean, are you finding that there are still many boundaries to be pushed, or are you still exploring? Because I mean, there's so much stuff, say in Omnisphere and Omnisphere 2 that are kind of you compile and you can include an awful lot of features. Are there techniques in synthesis that you think still have a lot of distance to be explored with? I mean, I know like FM synthesis, for instance, is notoriously underutilized because of its difficulty to use. But is it about the interface? I mean, where do you see the most exciting areas of expansion now?
Well, I think there's a lot of room for growth. I think one of the big challenges is the CPU power of current computers. In the last 4 or 5 years, we really haven't seen the big leaps that were happening before. The Moore's law is pretty much not in play anymore. They've reached a point where they can't put too much more in terms of at the atomic level. So I think there's going to be another wave though when we get into this. Whenever quantum computing is going to happen, when that sort of thing happens, when there's a big jump in power, then a lot of things will open up, because there are a lot of things that we can do that are amazing, but they take the entire power of the computer to just play a single voice.
Right.
And we need to be able to play lots and lots of voices in stereo and interact with all of our
the scary optimization word, isn't it? That kind of you see early demonstrations of software and you're going, wow, that's amazing, and then it's the process from there to the final product for the optimization, and that tends to really delineate what is actually going to happen in the end, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's some phenomenal things that are possible now, just on like a stereo file or
you've got a brand new Mac Pro with multiple cores maxed out, and you can get a really good sounding single note.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to when computers really can and so some of the bottlenecks that we have can really increase, because it will open up a lot of possibilities. That said, there are a lot of things still remaining that can be explored. So that's something we're doing. And yeah, absolutely. It's that's the coolest thing about making software synthesizers. Really, is that the bad part is that it's never done, but that's also the good part, is that it's constantly evolving. And I think people are starting to see. That's been one of the things that I think that's nice about Omnisphere 2, is people I think are starting to see that our philosophy is building on what we have, as opposed to constantly reinventing it from scratch and giving it a different
I think for me, I think it's the thing that's exciting is that when some form of hardware control of some really great software becomes more integrated and more flexible, so that it can grow with the software, or it can work both ways. And that's still for me is not there yet. And that's something that I think probably, because for many people, software is fantastic, but you just don't get that hands-on kind of feel. I mean, you must get that all the time. I mean, you're very fluent in it, but you've got this hardware, and there's a different kind of relationship you have with hardware, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's really a complicated problem because the thing is just in terms of the market, like what people are willing to pay for that hands-on control is so low.
Yeah,
it really limits the quality of what you can do, or making a business out of it. And there's people that are doing it, but it's tough to do. I think it's a really tough business to do. But yeah, I love hardware integration. I have a fantastic Omnisphere template for my Sub 37. That's awesome. It's basically I can control everything that you see on the Sub 37. I'm controlling an Omnisphere. And it gives you it gives you that experience that you're talking about, like where it feels like a hardware instrument.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think I first discovered that I had I think it was a Novation KS4, which has a lot of knobs on it, and you could have individual control of all the envelopes and that kind of stuff. And it starts to kind of make sense, and you're going, okay, I can reach for that, and it translates to the software version. I suppose the difficulty is when the software is doing, I don't know, granular or things that are not on the front panel of an analog subtractive synthesizer that you then have to kind of open it up.
Right. There's a lot of things. And the problem is, too, is because we've investigated this a lot. Problem is that once you put it in hardware, then you can't change the software. Or that becomes the more dedicated the hardware becomes, the friendlier it is. But then the less flexible the software can be. So it's an interesting problem. But I absolutely, that's something that we're very interested in improving. The hardware and software connection in every way that we can. And we've got some cool stuff in the works for that.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because I mean, we got NAMM coming up real fast. We often see you. I presume that Spectrasonics is going to be there, right?
Yes, we'll have a booth. Yes.
And I'm sure you couldn't tell me or wouldn't tell me if you have anything new. But are we going to be seeing anything from you guys that we should come by and swing by and check out, or are you going to keep it under wraps?
Okay. Well, I had a feeling you'd ask. So what I will say is we've got some really cool stuff happening in 2016. I'll also say that it's not what people are expecting. And I'll also say that it's not going to be at NAMM.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
Interesting. I'm guessing NAMM for you must be a great show, because you're not too far away, right? I mean, you're in the right part of the world. So is it just hop down in the morning, or do you come and stay locally?
I have to stay locally. Yeah, it's too crazy to get in and out. But yeah, I think this will be my, I don't know, 31st NAMM or something like that.
Wow, that is impressive.
Done way too many of them.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, the NAMM thing, the first time you go, and this is something that we've experienced when we take new crew members and team members over, the first day, they are disintegrated. They can't cope with the amount of stimulus. But when you get to be as old as cynical as we are, that's why you can't remember anybody's name or what you've just said to somebody, because you have to shut yourself down. Otherwise you become totally, your mind goes, it can drive you crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. It's like, and it is an extra dimension of it for me, because everybody, because I went to school in Orange County, I see classmates and college people.
Wow.
And here's this guy from kindergarten I thought was dead, but he's alive. And here's Herbie Hancock. And here's some guy I did a clinic for in Philadelphia in 1984. and he's wanting to talk to me, and everybody I've played, all the musicians I've played with, and I want to see and hang, and they're my friends, and all my customers and my distributors and dealers, and it's insane. It's totally. I have to kind of remove myself for moments because it's pretty overwhelming. The first one I did, I was 17 was when I went. I snuck in and printed up fake business cards at the local music store. I had a friend who worked there, and so I got a rubber stamp kit, and I snuck in and hung out in the Roland booth, and that was when they were introducing the TR-808.
Wow!
So that was pretty awesome.
Eric, thank you so much for your time. And we've been chatting for ages, and I know there's so much more we could cover, but I want to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having a chance to chat to you, and hopefully we'll see you in LA not too far away.
It was my pleasure, Nick. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so that's it for this week. This week, I say, for this episode. We will be back with normal service on our usual Wednesdays. I'm not sure when this is going to be out yet, so it might be a surprise for you all. So thank you very much for watching. I want to say thanks again to Eric Persing, Spectrasonics.net. Do check out Omnisphere and all the other instruments, and we'll see you again sometime soon. That's it. Bye-bye now.